Now, the goods, in my opinion, had to be a big parcel Sammachicha had taken, all lined in black and placed on top of the television set. A very loud crackle, a real blinding purple flash, just like that, and then there was nothing.
After this event, which leaves Paolo speechless, the group goes out into the street. And when they come back inside, Paolo realizes that his letter, which he'd left on the table, was gone. For a moment, they talk about who might have taken it, but nobody understands. Sammachicha's wife also denies touching it. At that point, Bruno urges everyone to go out into the street again.
There wasn't a soul in sight at all. Around midnight, or something like that. At a certain point, I feel something falls on my head. A little piece of paper all folded up. It was a scorched envelope. Open, and it was the letter I'd left on the console.
To make the phenomena possible, or to amplify them, including telepathy, which they made wide use of, the W56 used devices that were called nuclei. They could be placed in objects, in rooms, or even in the bodies of living creatures, including people.
Questi nuclei erano per loro una...
These nuclei were a necessary thing for them. Like if I want to receive a phone call from you, I need to have a phone at my house.
Bruno had a German shepherd named Dick. The friends told Bruno that the dog would play an important role in the contacts and in certain operations that called for the help of the humans. He would become a sort of amplifying antenna. So they asked Sammachicha to bring the dog to the seaside. And at their command, which came by telepathy, Dick was made to go into the water. At that point, the friends would treat the dog, placing nuclei under his paws. In fact, Dick was almost always with Bruno. In one of the film clips that have come to light, we see him looking out of the window while Bruno is filming a UFO circling over the palazzos of Milan, where Bruno lived for a while. It isn't the only ufological document made in Milan. One of the more controversial pieces of information that the W56 gave to their human friends concerned a conflict with an artificial race called Weirdos, but which Sammachicha renamed with the term CTR, which was the contraction of the word contraries.
One of the strange things about the friendship stories is the existence of enemies, the famous contraries, the CTR. While the W56 were ethical, these others were materialistic, virtually the opposite of the W56 in every way. They didn't speak of war, but of conflict, and said one reason they were here was to keep the CTR in check.
The friends called them science worshippers, saying the CTR were creatures without scruples. And their greatest fear was that we humans were following the same path the CTR had already covered. For the W56, the feelings of friendship, affection, love and harmony that they were creating between themselves and the human group, just as it is among human beings, were not just defining the quality of relationships.
For them, cohesion, friendship, loyalty, and things like that are not abstract concepts, but rather a living entity that they call Ureda. This living entity is fostered precisely by the sense of loyalty and was contrasted by an alter ego that was called Reda, which was essentially the opposite.
E a loro questa energia serviva come...
And for them, this energy served as a sort of fuel, let's say, a driving force for some of their means of defense, or anyway for their tools.
The defense instruments Gaspare talks about, the friends explained, were also important for the conflict they had with the CTR. They explained that friendship, which Ureda originated from, was so important that if the group hadn't kept the harmony high, or if the group was even dismembered, they themselves would have fallen victims of the CTR, who might well have destroyed their bases. But this wasn't the only reason to be friends. The W56 said that love, in its most unselfish sense, as well as ethics, respect, and altruism, should guide every thought and every action. They said these values were essential to ensure a safe and healthy evolutionary progress. A lesson that humanity had to put into practice if it wanted to avoid the risk of terrible self-destruction. The mere thought of doing harm was inconceivable to the W56, and the sense of ethics, morality, pervaded their every action, their every gesture, their every thought. Even their technology, their machines, were consciously impregnated with it. A concept that for us is unimaginable.
They said they were incapable of causing harm to anyone. They said that even their very devices would refuse to harm anyone. Ethics permeated everything about them, to the point that they would refuse. Indeed, they said that if they weren't able to avoid harming someone, then in that case they would self-destruct.
It wasn't by chance that the journalist Bruno Ghibaudi was with De Lama and Sammachicha during the sighting published by Domenica del Corriere. Ghibaudi was extremely involved in friendship and experienced everything there was to be tried, including the personal encounters with the W56. Stefano Breccia also knew him. He remembers very well how he joined the group.
At the time, Ghibaudi had a program on television about making model aircraft. Giancarlo had seen it by chance, and he liked this person. He asked for Bruno's permission, and Bruno agreed. As a result, Ghibaudi was brought to Milan to meet Bruno, and starting from then also became a part of the circle.
The presence of the journalist was important because he could indirectly publicize a lot of the information that was given by the friends.
He was a journalist who could help the case by writing about it, while we didn't have any connections like this. He had acquaintances in the field of journalism and television that we didn't have.
The pictures that Ghibaudi took of a UFO over Monte Mario in Rome attracted the attention of Cesare Zavattini. The famous filmmaker interviewed him and put the piece in a documentary film entitled The Mysteries of Rome. The words of Ghibaudi emphasized what the W56 had said was one of their main tasks on our planet: the control of the nuclear armaments belonging to the superpowers, in the fear that man might make the terrible choice of using them, unleashing a total war. In fact, this is one of the key themes of the entire story of worldwide contactism. Adamski, Siragusa, Menja, and many other contactees received the same kind of message from extraterrestrials. And the W56 actually intervened with their UFOs and their technology, but with previously trained terrestrial operators, to stop a situation that seemed it might lead to something irreparable. The incident occurred in 1967.
So an operation managed by human beings was launched, which was designed to disable all nuclear warheads in the Soviet Union and in the United States, in the face of a situation that seemed risky, that might degenerate from one minute to the next. There are books written by officers of the US Air Force, by now retired, which tell the story of how their battery of Minuteman missiles had been rendered inactive by flying saucers revolved in the area.
One of the books referred to by engineer Breccia was written by Robert Salas and James Klotz. It contains military documents obtained through the law on the Freedom of Information, the so-called Freedom of Information Act. But there are other clues about the interest these beings had in nuclear weapons. The atomic tests have always been filmed and photographed with special equipment, with technologies that can capture the very first moments of the thermonuclear explosion. In these pictures, we see the explosion in the first few microseconds, when the terrible mushroom cloud hasn't yet formed. In the third snapshot, we note the presence of an Adamskian flying saucer a few meters from the explosion. If authentic, this photo would give us an idea of the incredible technological capabilities of these creatures. Another extremely important person in the history of Italian ufology was Consul Alberto Perego, who wrote as many as 4 books between the 60s and 70s analysing the world scene and pointing out policy choices made by governments that would have been affected by the overt or covert activities of this sort of alien aviation. Many exceptionally clear photos of UFOs appeared in these volumes. Some of them were even identified as being the inside of a cockpit of a flying saucer. Perego cited the dates and locations of the sightings, but never mentioned the name of the authors of the photos. The places were almost always the classic zones where the W56 and the Friendship Group were active. Milan, Pescara, Francavilla, Montesilvano. And in fact, the photos were made precisely by the people who were part of Friendship. But we've only learned this today. For Gaspare da Lama, Alberto Perego was of paramount importance. Perego introduced him to the comprehension of the profound implications of the UFO phenomenon and contactism, at a time when it was extremely difficult to find material about these issues in Italian.
And then he told me how things were according to him. Naturally, I reeled a bit of the chair because I didn't expect it. He really knew. I mean, he'd understood a lot. He'd understood. A man of great valor, an idealist, a pure man. He, too, was amazing, very cultured.
Perego also announced to Gaspare that he intended to publish a book where he would reveal everything he knew about the presence in our midst of beings from other worlds, a proposal that never materialized, however. Among the correspondence that Gaspare has kept are letters written by Consul Perego himself. In one of these, among other things, he talks about his intention to publish the book, I'll Tell All. Other statements made in this excerpt of the letter are also very interesting.
Dear, I imagine you've guessed my bitter experience of recent years. For the revelation of the new reality, I'd bet on 2 men who have disappeared from the scene, John 23 and Kennedy. As is well known, Kennedy died 5 days before my report went into circulation. As you've seen, everyone keeps quiet or pretends not to know. In 1965, I hope to publish I'll Tell All, but I believe I've already said a good deal. I'm sending you with best wishes, the most affectionate remembrance, Alberto Perego.
But the alleged tasks of these creatures would have been others as well. Another purpose of the presence of the W56 was to help our evolutionary process, to push us to a higher level of understanding. That's why they had been on our planet for a very long time, and even shared with us some of our suffering in the matter. They also revealed that their real name was Acri. Stefano Breccia has done research on this name, discovering some very interesting aspects.
The word Acri is a plural noun in Sanskrit that means the sages.